cities die from wars, others from natural disasters. But there are places that were erased from the map with a single political decision and a dam. Since 1950, 47 cities have disappeared under artificial lakes. 3 million people lost their homes forever. But here's what nobody expected. These cities weren't destroyed. They were preserved. Under the cold water, time stopped. Medieval wooden houses function perfectly after 70 years submerged. Documents remain legible. Furniture stays intact. It's as if we had discovered the formula for perfect conservation, but only after killing the places we wanted to save. These aren't forgotten ruins. They are submerged libraries, waiting for someone to dive down and read their secrets. Chapter 1. The exact moment when everything disappeared. A solitary bell tower breaks the water's surface. That's what you see when you arrive at the Uribanticaparo Reservoir in Venezuela. Just the tip of a church tower, like the hand of a drowning person asking for help. But down there, 40 meters deep, there's an entire city waiting. Potosi was a normal town. 1,200 people lived their quiet lives until 1985 arrived. That year, the government decided they needed a bigger dam, and the city of Potosi was right where they wanted to put it. The thing is that nobody expected it to be so fast. The calculation said the filling would take 5 years. 5 years for people to get used to the idea, so they could move calmly, so they could say goodbye to their houses little by little. But the water had other plans. In 24 hours, Potosi disappeared from the map. 1,200 people had to run out with whatever they were wearing. The streets they had walked their entire lives were underwater in one day. Their houses, their memories, their entire lives, everything went to the bottom of an artificial lake. Now comes the strange part. The water rose 47 meters in 1 week. 47 meters. To give you an idea, that's like a 15-story building. Imagine living on the 10th floor, and suddenly the water reaches your window. The speed was insane, 2 meters and 70 centimeters per day. Every morning, the water was almost 3 meters higher than the day before. The last inhabitants watched their town sink in slow motion, but not slow enough to process what was happening. And here's what nobody tells you about floods. Cold water preserves things in a way that defies all logic. The water temperature in Potosi stays at a constant 12 degrees Celsius. 12 degrees. All year round, for 25 years. That temperature works like a giant refrigerator. The engineers of the Uribanticaparo Dam handled impressive numbers. The total capacity is 1,620,000,000 cubic meters of water. To put it in perspective, that's enough water to fill more than 600,000 Olympic pools. The flooded area covers 162 square kilometers, an extension equivalent to the entire city of Miami disappearing underwater. But numbers don't capture human reality. 289 houses remained completely intact underwater. Not destroyed, not collapsed. Intact. As if people had gone out to buy bread and never returned. So what happens when a city disappears like this? Well, it turns out Potosi isn't alone. This isn't an isolated case of Venezuelan bad luck. It's part of a global pattern that nobody wants to admit. Since 1950, 47 cities have been completely swallowed by dams worldwide. 47. We're not talking about little towns lost in the middle of nowhere. We're talking about entire communities with their histories, their traditions, their ways of life. The figures are brutal. 3,200,000 people have been permanently displaced by these projects. Families who had lived in the same place for generations, suddenly homeless, without a physical past to return to. In Japan, 13 villages sleep under Lake Okutama. In Brazil, 7 cities rest under the Sobradinho Dam. Every country has its own sacrificed ones. Every government has made the decision to erase entire communities in the name of progress. But there's something that connects all these submerged places, something that scientists don't quite understand. The water preserves them in an almost supernatural way. Let's take the most extreme case, Xicheng in China. A city 1,300 years old that was intentionally flooded in 1959. Today, it's between 26 and 40 meters below the surface of Chiandao Lake. And here comes the incredible part. 95% of its structures are completely intact. We're not talking about ruins, we're talking about complete buildings with their doors, their windows, their decorations. The divers who have descended report something that shouldn't be possible. The original wooden doors still work. After more than 60 years underwater, you can open and close the doors as if the city had been abandoned yesterday. How is this possible? On land, those same wooden structures would have disintegrated in 50 years. The weather, insects, humidity, everything conspires against preservation. But underwater, at that constant and controlled temperature, time seems to have stopped. Scientists have theories. They talk about the absence of oxygen, stable temperature, the lack of specific bacteria that cause decomposition. But theories don't explain the perfection of the conservation. They don't explain why a 600-year-old wooden door still works after decades submerged. The comparison is chilling. It's as if you had put your entire city in a cryogenic capsule. Everything remains suspended in time, waiting. The streets maintain their shape. The houses preserve their structure. Objects remain where their owners left them. And that leads us to a disturbing question. What else is waiting down there? What secrets? What stories, what evidence of lived lives are suspended in those liquid silences? Every submerged city is an accidental archive of humanity, an involuntary museum where every object tells a story that was abruptly interrupted. Clocks marking the exact time of abandonment, books open to the page where someone stopped reading, tables set for dinners that were never served. And meanwhile, on the surface, life continues. The reservoirs generate electricity, provide drinking water, irrigate crops. Progress justifies the sacrifice. But below, in perpetual darkness, the ghost cities keep vigil. Potosi's bell tower is still there, piercing the surface like a permanent reminder. It's not just a church tower. It's a tombstone marking the place where an entire community was buried alive underwater. But Shicheng isn't the only one. There are places where water didn't just preserve buildings, it preserved secrets, secrets that some prefer never surface. Chapter 2. The city that reappears every 10 years. There are towns that die once and stay dead. But Fabrice di Caregin is different. This Italian city has died and resurrected 5 times in the last 70 years. And every time it comes back to life, it's as if time hadn't passed. We're in the Apuan Alps in Tuscany, a place where mountains rise like stone cathedrals and valleys guard secrets dating from the 13th century. Here, in 1947, the Italian government decided it needed an artificial lake, and Fabrice di Caregin was right in the wrong place. The story is familiar, but with a macabre twist. 163 families had to abandon their homes. Centuries of history erased with a government order. The water rose slowly, swallowing streets, houses, memories. But here's the strange thing. From time to time, the city returns. It's not magic, it's engineering. When the lake needs maintenance or when there are severe droughts, they drain the water. And there's Fabrice di Caregin, like an architectural zombie emerging from its liquid grave. The first time it reappeared was in 1958, 11 years after being submerged. The former inhabitants who were still alive approached with a mixture of horror and nostalgia. Their houses were still there. Their streets were still there. Everything was still there, but covered in silt, and with that silence that only abandoned places have. But the really disturbing part came when they started inspecting the structures. The bell tower, which had been built in the 14th century, measured exactly 14 meters and 70 centimeters in height, the same measurement it had before the flood, not 1 centimeter less. The walls of the houses maintained their original thickness of 1 meter and 20 centimeters, not a crack, not a collapse. The windows preserved their wooden frames as if they had been carved the day before. And we're talking about wood that had spent 11 years underwater. The construction experts who came to assess the damage were speechless. According to all manuals, wood exposed to water for so long should have rotted completely. Constant humidity, pressure changes, microorganisms. Everything conspires against the preservation of organic materials. But there was the wood, solid and resistant. The second reappearance was in 1983, 25 years underwater this time. And again, the city emerged intact. More than intact. It was better preserved than many inhabited villages in the region. The architects who studied it said something that shouldn't be possible. The structures were in better condition than when they were submerged. How can something improve after being buried underwater for decades? The answer is in the numbers. The lake's temperature stays constant at 8 degrees Celsius. 8 degrees, winter and summer, all year round. That temperature stops practically all decomposition processes. It's as if the city had been in a giant refrigerator. But temperature doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain why stones remain joined with the same mortar from the 13th century. It doesn't explain why iron nails haven't rusted. It doesn't explain why clay tiles maintain their original color. In 1994, it appeared again. This time, tourists arrived by the thousands. 50,000 people in 3 months traveled to see the ghost town. Some came from places as far away as Germany and France. What attracted them so much? The testimonies of visitors are consistent and disturbing. They speak of a sensation of observing something that shouldn't exist, of walking through streets where you can feel the presence of the people who lived there, of entering houses where it seems the inhabitants left 5 minutes ago, not 50 years. And then there are the objects. That's what really defies all logic. When the city reappeared in 2021 after 27 years submerged, researchers made a detailed inventory. What they found has no scientific explanation. Wall clocks that mark the exact time of the moment when the town was evacuated in 1947. Not the approximate time, the exact time, as if time had stopped at the precise instant when the last family closed their door. Ceramic plates on kitchen tables without a single crack. After 74 years underwater, the tableware was intact. Some plates still had remains of fossilized but recognizable food. Books with legible pages. We're not talking about medieval parchments designed to last centuries. We're talking about common paper books, personal diaries, school notebooks. The paper should have disintegrated in weeks, but there they were with visible ink and clear words. Scientists took samples of everything: paper, wood, metal, ceramic. The analyses revealed something that contradicts everything we know about material deterioration. The objects weren't just preserved, they were in better condition than similar objects that had remained on land during the same period. It's as if the water had functioned as a perfect preservative, but there's something more disturbing than the preservation of objects. It's the human details that really give you goosebumps. In one house, they found a table set for 4 people. The cutlery was placed exactly where they had left it. The napkins folded the same way. The chairs pushed under the table as if the family had gone out for a walk and would return any moment. In another house, a child had left his toys on his bedroom floor. Little lead soldiers formed in battle, a leather ball, a wooden horse. Everything was where an 8-year-old boy had left it in 1947. That boy, if he was still alive in 2021, was 82 years old. Researchers found unsent letters written in the last days before evacuation. Letters addressed to distant relatives, saying goodbye to the town, promising to write from the new home. Letters that never reached their destination because their authors were forced to abandon everything too quickly. One of those letters, written by a woman named Elena Bertolini, said, "I don't know when we'll be able to return home, but I hope it's soon. The garden flowers must be blooming by now." The garden flowers were still there, fossilized but recognizable stems, in the same places where Elena had planted them decades earlier. The average visit to Fabrice di Caregine when it reappears lasts 3 hours and 42 minutes. It's a specific time, almost ritual. Tourists arrive, walk through the streets in silence, enter the abandoned houses, touch the preserved objects, and after those 3 hours and 42 minutes, they leave. Why exactly that time? Psychologists who have studied the phenomenon have a theory. It's the time it takes a person to completely process the impossibility of what they're seeing. More time than that, and the mind starts rejecting the experience as too strange to be real. Some visitors report dreams after the visit, dreams where they see the town's people living their normal lives as if time had never passed, as if Eleanor were still tending her flowers and the boy were still playing with his lead soldiers. But the dreams always end the same way, with water slowly rising, covering the houses, silencing the voices, returning the town to its liquid grave. And that's exactly what happens. After a few months, when the lake's maintenance ends, or when the rains return, the water rises again. Fabrice di Caregin sinks once more into aquatic silence, taking its secrets to the depths. The next time it appears, probably within a decade, everything will remain the same. The clocks will mark the same time. The plates will remain on the tables. The letters will wait to be sent. As if the entire town were trapped in a temporal loop, condemned to eternally repeat the moment of its abandonment. But what about places that never return to the surface? What secrets do cities that remain forever underwater keep? Chapter 3. The temple that floats on the surface. When the water drops in March, it appears like a miracle. The golden dome of Wat Nong Buayai Temple breaks the lake's surface like the hull of an ancestral submarine emerging from the depths. But this isn't science fiction, it's Thailand, and this happens every year. The Buddhist temple is more than 400 years old. It was built in the 17th century, when this region of Thailand was pure jungle and the river flowed free without dams to control it. The monks chose this place because they said it had something special, an energy that favored meditation and contact with the divine. They might have been right, because what happens here defies any rational explanation. In 1975, the government decided to build the Vajiralongkorn Dam. Economic development required energy, and the Kwai Noi River was perfect for generating electricity. The only problem was that Wat Nong Buayai Temple was directly in the zone that would be flooded. The monks resisted, not just because of the temple's historical value, but because they maintained that the place was sacred in a way that authorities couldn't understand. They spoke of forces that shouldn't be disturbed, of spiritual balances that would break if water covered the temple. The authorities predictably ignored the mystical warnings and proceeded with the project. The day the flooding began, the monks performed a special ceremony. They placed a Buddha statue 4 meters and 70 centimeters tall in the temple's main hall. The statue was made of solid bronze with real gold inlays. It weighed almost 3 tons. The monks said that Buddha would remain watching over the temple no matter what happened. Prophetic words, because that's exactly what he's been doing for the last 48 years. When the water rose, the temple gradually disappeared beneath the surface. First the gardens, then the auxiliary buildings, finally the main temple. The last to disappear was the golden dome of the central tower, and there it stayed, 7 meters underwater for most of the year. But here comes the strange part. During the dry season, from March to May, the water level drops enough for part of the temple to become visible again. Not the entire temple, just the upper part. Exactly 3 meters and 20 centimeters of the building are exposed each year. And those 3 meters and 20 centimeters have created one of the most peculiar religious phenomena in the modern world. 15,000 pilgrims arrive each year during those 3 months. They come from all over Thailand, but also from neighboring countries like Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia. Some travel incredible distances, more than 1,000 kilometers just to see the temple that appears and disappears. But they can't simply walk to it. The temple is 2 kilometers and 800 meters from the nearest shore. The only way to reach it is by boat. And here's where things get really interesting. The pilgrims don't use modern motorboats. They use traditional bamboo rafts, exactly the same type that the original monks used 400 years ago, as if there's an unwritten code that says you have to arrive at the temple the same way the ancient inhabitants would have. The raft journey takes exactly 45 minutes, not 40, not 50, 45 minutes of silent navigation through waters that seem greener and denser than normal water. Local guides say it's because of sediments from the bottom, but pilgrims have their own theories. When you finally reach the temple, the first thing you notice is the silence. There are no bird sounds, no insects, no constant murmur of aquatic life you'd expect in a lake. Just silence, as if the water itself were holding its breath. The second thing you notice is the impossible transparency of the water around the temple. In the rest of the lake, the water is murky, with visibility of less than a meter. But in a 50-meter radius around the temple, the water is crystal clear. You can see to the bottom with perfect clarity, and there at the bottom is the Buddha. The bronze statue remains in its original position in the temple's main hall. After 48 years underwater, it should be completely corroded. Bronze exposed to water for so long normally gets covered with a greenish patina and gradually deteriorates until it becomes unrecognizable. But this statue shines. Divers who have descended to inspect the statue report something that has no scientific explanation. The Buddha's eyes seem to follow whoever approaches. It's not an optical effect caused by water refraction. The eyes literally move, tracking the diver's movement. Even more disturbing, the gold inlays in the statue have grown. Instead of disappearing or becoming dull, the golden veins have extended through the bronze like luminous roots. Spectrographic analyses confirm it's real gold, but there's no way to explain how it can be growing underwater. The monks who arrived in 1975 have already died. But each year, during the season when the temple is accessible, new monks appear. They come in smaller rafts, dressed in traditional orange robes, and perform ceremonies in the partially submerged temple. Where do these monks come from? Nobody knows exactly. They don't belong to any specific monastery in the region. Some speak Thai dialect, so ancient that linguists struggle to understand them. And when the season ends and the water rises again, they disappear as mysteriously as they arrived. The ceremonies they perform are strange. Instead of traditional Buddhist chants, they intone something that sounds more like lamentations. And they always end the ceremony the same way, throwing lotus flowers into the water around the submerged statue. The flowers sink slowly, but here comes the really disturbing part. When they reach the level of the Buddha's eyes, they stop. They float exactly at the height of the statue's eyes, forming a perfect circle, as if an invisible force kept them in position. Fish avoid that area. The lake is full of aquatic life, but in the 50 meters around the temple, there isn't a single fish species. Marine biologists have tried introducing fish in that zone to study the phenomenon, but the animals simply swim away as if there's an invisible barrier they can't cross. The average time pilgrims spend at the temple is exactly 45 minutes, the same time it takes to get there. As if there's a natural limit to how long you can be in the presence of something that shouldn't exist. Visitors' testimonies are consistent and disturbing. They speak of a sensation of being watched, not just by the statue, but by something bigger. They describe pressure in their ears, as if they were descending to great depth, even though they're at water level. And many report visions. The visions are always similar. They see the temple as it was before the flood. They see monks walking through the gardens, performing their daily activities. They see the place full of life and spiritual activity. But when they blink, they see again only the partially submerged dome and aquatic silence. A hydraulic engineer who visited the temple in 2019 tried to take scientific measurements of the phenomenon. He brought sonar equipment, water temperature meters, underwater cameras. He wanted to document exactly what was happening in that place, and his equipment worked perfectly until he approached the temple. At 50 meters away, all electronic instruments started failing. Cameras automatically went out of focus. Sonar emitted contradictory readings. Temperature meters showed impossible measurements. But the strangest thing was this. When he reviewed the few photos he managed to take before his cameras failed, in each image, something appeared that he hadn't seen with his own eyes. In each photo, around the Buddha statue, there were translucent human figures. Figures dressed like ancient monks, floating in the water, with hands joined in prayer position. Figures that weren't there when he took the photos. The engineer never published his research. In fact, he never spoke publicly about what he found. He only said that some places aren't meant to be explained by science. Some places simply exist beyond our understanding. And every year when March arrives and the water drops, the temple reappears. Pilgrims return in their bamboo rafts. The mysterious monks return to perform their strange ceremonies. The lotus flowers return to float impossibly around the Buddha's eyes. And the statue continues watching as the monks promised almost 50 years ago. Watching something that perhaps is better left submerged. But if a temple can preserve so much strangeness underwater, what secrets do entire cities that never return to the surface keep? Chapter 4. The Complete City Under Crystal. 40 meters below the surface of Qiandao Lake, there's a city that should be in ruins. Instead, it's the best preserved urban structure in the world, Xicheng isn't just a submerged city. It's a time machine. The city has 1,400 years of history. It was founded in the year 621 during the Tang dynasty, at a time when Europe was still emerging from the Dark Ages and America was an unknown continent to the Western world. For 13 centuries, Xicheng grew, prospered, became an important commercial center in Zhejiang province. In 1959, all of that changed overnight. The Chinese government decided to build the Sinan hydroelectric station. It was part of the Great Leap Forward, Mao's ambitious campaign to modernize China in record time. The needs of national development outweighed any historical or cultural considerations. 290,000 people lived in Xicheng when the evacuation order arrived. 290,000 lives that had to relocate to make room for progress. They were given 48 hours to abandon a city that had been their home for generations. Imagine that scene, families packing centuries of history into handcarts, elderly people who had been born on those streets having to say goodbye forever to everything they knew. Children not understanding why they had to leave their toys, their friends, their entire world. But here's what makes Xicheng's case unique. They didn't destroy it before flooding it. They didn't dynamite the buildings or dismantle the structures like they did in other places. They simply filled it with water and sealed it as if it were a time capsule. The city covers 62 square kilometers. To put it in perspective, that's larger than the center of Paris. A complete urban area with its residential neighborhoods, its commercial zones, its government buildings, its temples, its parks. Everything intact underwater. For 43 years, Xicheng was a secret. The Chinese government didn't talk about it. Maps didn't show it. Officially, it didn't exist. It was as if they had erased 1,400 years of history with an administrative order. But in 2001, something changed. A team of professional divers obtained permission to explore Qiandao Lake. Officially, it was a dam safety inspection project. Unofficially, it was the first real opportunity to document what remained of Xicheng. What they found redefined everything we knew about underwater preservation. The city was intact, not partially intact, not surprisingly well preserved, completely intact. As if the last inhabitants had gone out for lunch and were going to return any moment. The numbers are impossible to believe. 95% of all structures remained in perfect condition, 265 stone arches without a single crack, 5 monumental city gates with their original inscriptions completely legible, paved streets where not a single stone was missing. But the really incredible thing was in the details. 5-story buildings remained structurally stable after more than 4 decades submerged. Internal staircases preserved all their steps. Wooden doors didn't just exist, they worked. Divers could open and close doors that had been under 40 meters of water for half a century. How is that possible? Wood exposed to water should have disintegrated in less than a decade. But here it was, solid and functional like the day it was installed. Furniture remained in place, tables, chairs, beds, wardrobes, everything exactly where their owners had left it when they evacuated hastily in 1959. In some houses, plates were still on the tables as if the family had been interrupted in the middle of a meal. And then there were the documents. Divers found government archives, commercial records, personal letters, diaries. Documents written on common paper that should have disintegrated in weeks underwater. But there they were, with traditional Chinese ink perfectly visible, words clear and legible. A personal diary found in a house in the residential district had the last entry dated September 21st, 1959, 2 days before the final evacuation. The text said, "Tomorrow we leave. I don't know if we'll ever return. I hope our house is here when we come back." The house is still there, and so is the diary, but the most disturbing thing isn't the preserved objects, it's the sensation that all divers who have descended to Xicheng report. They speak of a disturbing atmosphere, as if the city were waiting for its inhabitants to return. The streets maintain their original layout. Divers can navigate through the neighborhoods, following the same routes that residents used 64 years ago. Store signs still hang in their places, advertising products that no longer exist and services that are no longer needed. In the city center, there's a main square surrounded by government buildings. In the center of the square, there was an ornamental fountain that worked with a system of underground channels. The fountain is still there, now filled with lake water, but maintaining its original shape and structure. Religious buildings are the best preserved. There are Buddhist and Taoist temples distributed throughout the city, some more than 800 years old. Deity statues remain on their altars, sacred inscriptions remain carved on the walls, fossilized incense remains in their burners. One temple in particular has caught researchers' attention. It's a 12th century Taoist temple dedicated to the water dragon. The monks who built it believed it controlled floods and protected the city from aquatic disasters. The irony is chilling. The temple dedicated to protecting the city from water is now the only thing that can protect it from being forgotten. In 2011, the Chinese government finally officially recognized Xicheng's existence and began allowing limited tourist expeditions. But access is strictly controlled. Only 200 certified divers can visit the city each year. The cost per dive is $2,400. It's not just the price of a unique experience, it's the price of access to a time machine. Dives are limited to a maximum of 25 minutes. It's not an arbitrary safety restriction. Divers who have spent more time in the city report disturbing psychological effects. They start to feel they belong there, that they should stay, that the surface is the strange place. A professional diver with 20 years of experience described his visit like this: "It's the most beautiful and most disturbing experience I've had. You walk through streets that were built when Europe was in the Middle Ages. You enter houses where you can feel the presence of the families who lived there. It's like visiting the past, but a past that's completely alive." Scientific analyses of materials recovered from Xicheng have revealed something that contradicts what we know about deterioration. Objects aren't just preserved, they're in better condition than similar objects that have remained on the surface during the same period. The ink in documents is clearer and more legible than that of contemporary documents kept in terrestrial archives. Wood is more solid and resistant than wood from similar structures exposed to air. It's as if Chandao Lake's water had functioned as the perfect preservative. But there's something more disturbing than perfect preservation. Divers report anomalies that have no scientific explanation. Some have seen lights moving through the city streets, as if they were lanterns carried by invisible people. Others have heard sounds that shouldn't exist underwater. Distant conversations, children's laughter, the noise of commercial activity. Underwater cameras often capture strange images. Shadows that move inconsistently with the water flow, human figures that appear in photos but weren't seen by divers during the dive. A documentary team that filmed in Xicheng in 2018 reviewed their recordings and found something impossible. In multiple shots, house windows showed interior light, as if there were people living inside. But when divers investigated those same houses during filming, they were completely dark. Is it possible that a city can maintain some kind of spiritual life after being abandoned? Can a place keep the memory of its inhabitants so intensely that this memory becomes tangible? There are no scientific answers to these questions. There's only Xicheng waiting at the bottom of Chandao Lake, perfectly preserving not just its physical structures, but also something much more mysterious: the essence of what it means to be a home. And while the city waits in its aquatic silence, one wonders what other secrets are kept in the depths of the world's artificial lakes. What other cities are waiting, perfectly preserved, for someone to have the courage to descend and face the past we thought was lost forever. Chapter 5. The Bell Tower That Defies Gravity. There's an image that has gone viral on social media more than 45 million times. It's a simple photograph, a medieval bell tower that seems to float in the middle of an alpine lake. It looks impossible, as if someone had used Photoshop to create an optical illusion. But it's completely real. We're at Lake Reschensee on the border between Italy and Austria. Here, a 14th century bell tower rises 22 meters above the water's surface. It seems to be floating, defying the laws of physics. But below the water, there are 31 more meters of structure that you can't see. The bell tower belonged to the village of Graun, also known as Curon in Italian. It was a small but prosperous community in the heart of the Alps. 1,000 inhabitants lived their quiet lives in stone and wood houses that had withstood centuries of brutal winters and mountain summers. In 1950, Italian authorities decided they needed a dam. Hydroelectric energy was the future, and the valley where ground stood was perfect for creating an artificial lake. 163 houses were condemned, 1,000 people lost their homes. 600 years of South Tyrolean German traditions were sacrificed in the name of progress. But something went wrong with the demolition. When it came time to destroy the church and its bell tower, workers encountered an unexpected technical problem. The structure was more solid than they had calculated. The bell tower had been built with 14th century construction techniques that modern engineers didn't quite understand. The foundations measured 8 meters by 8 meters, excavated directly into the mountain's solid rock. The walls were made with local quarry stone joined with mortar that included ancient Roman elements. When they tried to dynamite it, the explosion barely made a mark on the surface. The second detonation didn't work either. For the third explosion, they brought enough explosives to destroy an entire building. The result, a few loose stones and a structure that remained as solid as ever. The engineers gave up. They decided it was more economical to leave it there and simply fill the valley with water. They thought that eventually, water pressure and time would do the job that explosives couldn't do. They were wrong. 73 years later, the bell tower is still there. Not only that, it remains perfectly vertical, resisting alpine winds that can reach 120 kilometers per hour. It's as if it were anchored by an invisible force. Modern structural analyses reveal something that shouldn't be possible. The submerged part of the bell tower shows no signs of deterioration. 31 meters of stone structure underwater, subjected to constant pressure, seasonal temperature changes, and decades of aquatic erosion, and it remains intact. Even stranger, measurements taken every 5 years since 1975 show that the bell tower hasn't moved a millimeter from its original position. No inclination, no sinking, no lateral displacement. It's as if it were part of the place's natural geology. But the visible structure is only part of the story. Under the water, there's an entire village waiting. Diving expeditions have mapped the 163 submerged houses. The central square is still there, with its intact medieval fountain. The main streets maintain their original layout. The cemetery, which was relocated before the flood, left behind the roots of centuries-old trees that now form a strange and beautiful underwater forest. Divers report a disturbing experience swimming through ground streets. The houses preserve their traditional alpine architecture, sloped roofs to support snow, small windows to conserve heat, carved wooden balconies. Everything is there, like a submerged museum of European rural life. In some houses, furniture remains in place, solid wood tables that have resisted decades underwater without rotting, chairs that maintain their original shape, wardrobes with their doors closed, keeping secrets that no one dares to discover. And then there are the bells. The bell tower has 4 bronze bells installed in 1357. When the village was flooded, the bells were submerged along with everything else. According to logic, they should have been silenced forever. Water should have stopped any possibility of sound, but during winter storms, people in the area swear they can hear the bells ringing underwater. Scientists have tried to explain the phenomenon. They talk about vibrations transmitted through water, acoustic effects caused by atmospheric pressure during storms. But their explanations don't explain why the bells ring with the same call-to-mass pattern they used when the village was alive. The phenomenon has become so well known that it's now part of local folklore. Regional inhabitants say that when you hear the bells during a storm, it's because ground's ghosts are calling the living not to forget the dead. Netflix even made a television series inspired by the story called Curon. The series takes enormous creative liberties, adding supernatural and horror elements that have no basis in reality. But it achieved something that decades of documentaries hadn't accomplished, making millions of people know that Gran exists. Tourism skyrocketed after the series premiered. 2.5 million visitors arrive each year to see the bell tower. The image has become one of the most photographed sites in the Alps. Influencers, professional photographers, casual tourists all come to capture the impossible image of the floating tower. But there's something disturbing about the place's tourist popularity. People come to photograph something that represents the destruction of an entire community. They take smiling selfies in front of what is essentially a collective tombstone. The few former ground inhabitants who are still alive have mixed feelings about their lost village's fame. On one hand, they're happy that people remember that Gran existed. On the other hand, it hurts them that their tragedy has become a tourist attraction. Maria Eichholzer was 12 years old when her family had to abandon Gran. Now she's 85 years old and lives in a nearby village. Every summer she comes to sit by the lake and looks at the bell tower of her former church. People come and take photos, says Maria. They think it's beautiful. For me, it's the place where my childhood is buried. Maria's words capture something essential about these submerged places. For tourists, they're photogenic curiosities. For the people who lost them, they're wounds that never heal completely. Gran's bell tower has become an involuntary symbol of something bigger. The ease with which we can erase entire communities when we decide that progress is more important than preservation. But maybe it's also a symbol of resistance. After all, it resisted the explosives, resisted the decades, resisted oblivion. It's still there, emerging from the water, like a permanent reminder that some things refuse to disappear completely. And while the bell tower maintains its solitary vigil, one can't help but wonder, what other monuments to human memory are waiting under the waters of the world's artificial lakes? What other communities were sacrificed but refused to die? Chapter 6. The Voices That Never Fell Silent. There are political decisions that change governments, and there are political decisions that erase entire towns from the map. The story of Capel Selen in Wales is one of those decisions that still resonates 58 years later. In 1965, the British Parliament held a vote. The issue, flooding a Welsh valley to create a reservoir that would supply water to the English city of Liverpool. 35 of the 36 Welsh parliamentarians voted against it. The final result, the English decision was imposed anyway. It wasn't just a political defeat, it was the administrative murder of a community. Capel Selen was small, 48 houses, a school with 9 students, a post office that had been operating since 1878, a Methodist chapel that gave the town its name. 70 inhabitants in total. From any numerical perspective, it was insignificant. Except for one crucial detail, it was the last town in Wales where 100% of the population spoke Welsh as their mother tongue. Welsh is a Celtic language with more than 1,400 years of continuous history. It survived the Roman invasion, the Norman conquest, centuries of English pressure to disappear. In 1965, it was in critical danger of extinction, and Capel Selen was one of its last pure refugees. The residents fought. They organized protests, presented petitions, ran media campaigns. They filled the streets of London with demonstrators shouting slogans in Welsh. It was one of the first Welsh nationalist resistance movements of the 20th century. It was useless. In October 1965, the bulldozers arrived at Capel Selen. First, they demolished the houses to prevent them from becoming dangerous underwater obstacles. Then came the engineers to build the Tryweryn Dam. Finally came the water. The town disappeared under the reservoir, but its political ghost remained alive. The destruction of Capel Selen became a symbol of Welsh nationalism. The phrase, Cofiwch Tryweryn, remember Tryweryn, appeared painted on walls throughout Wales. 58 years later, it still appears. It became the battle cry of a nation that refused to let its culture be erased by decisions made in London. But the really disturbing things started happening during droughts. In 1976, 1984, and 1995, the level of Tryweryn Reservoir dropped enough for remains of the town to appear. Not much, just the foundations of some buildings, fragments of walls, the foundations of the school. But it was enough for former inhabitants to make pilgrimages there. Glyn Evans was 15 years old when his family had to move from Capel Selen. In 1984, when he was 34, he returned to the reservoir during the drought to see the remains of his childhood home. "I found the foundations of our kitchen," Glyn recalls. The stone floor was still there, with the marks where the table had been where we ate breakfast every morning. My mother had carved our names into one of the stones when I was 8 years old. The carving was still there, perfect, as if she had done it yesterday. The testimonies of other former inhabitants are similar and disturbing. They speak of finding objects that should have disappeared decades ago, farm tools buried in the mud but still recognizable, fragments of slate from the school with lessons in Welsh still visible. And then there's the cemetery. When they decided to flood Capel Sealan, the authorities exhumed all the bodies from the cemetery and relocated them to higher ground. It was an efficient bureaucratic process. Each grave was catalogued, each body identified, each headstone numbered for relocation. But they couldn't relocate the roots. The cemetery trees were over 200 years old. Their root systems extended for acres underground, intertwining with the graves, embracing the dead in a network of wood and earth that had grown for generations. When they filled the valley with water, the roots remained. And during droughts, when the water level drops, they emerge like wooden skeletons, creating a ghostly underwater forest that marks exactly where Capel Sealan's cemetery was. Visitors who have seen this forest of roots describe a deeply disturbing experience. The roots form patterns that seem deliberate, as if they were trying to spell something. Some swear they can see shapes of Welsh words formed by the submerged branches, but Capel Sealan is not the only town that refuses to die in silence. Across the Atlantic, in Missouri, there is another similar story. Old Pattonsburg was a typical American Midwest farming town, 285 inhabitants, a Methodist church, a bank, a gas station, an elementary school. Nothing special until 1993. That year, the Missouri River flooded catastrophically. Old Pattonsburg was under 3 meters of water for weeks. When the water finally receded, the town was uninhabitable. The houses were ruined, the infrastructure destroyed, the local economy completely collapsed. The federal government offered a radical solution: relocate the entire town to higher ground and convert the original site into a controlled flood zone. It was efficient, it was logical, it was the correct practical decision, and it was also the end of Old Pattonsburg. The inhabitants accepted the relocation, but with a strange condition. They wanted to take everything they could move. Not just personal belongings, but architectural elements. Doors, windows, wooden beams, decorative bricks, even parts of the church bell tower. New Pattonsburg was built 2 kilometers upstream, incorporating physical elements from the original town. But the new residents report something disturbing: recurring dreams about the submerged town. The dreams are consistent among different people. They see Old Pattonsburg as it was before the flood, with people walking through the streets, children playing in the parks, normal life developing underwater. But in the dreams, the submerged inhabitants look at them reproachfully, as if accusing them of having abandoned the real place for a copy. Sarah Martinez lived in Old Pattonsburg for 30 years before the flood. Now she lives in New Pattonsburg, in a house that incorporates the front door of her original home. Every time I go through that door, Sarah says, for a second I expect to see my old living room on the other side. Instead, I see my new living room, which has the same furniture and the same photos, but it doesn't feel like home. It feels like a play where we're all acting out our previous lives. The testimonies of Sarah and other former inhabitants of relocated towns point to something that urban planners rarely consider. You can't transplant a community like you transplant a tree. Places have souls, and that soul cannot be packed and moved. The global statistics are brutal. Since 1960, 58 towns have been completely sacrificed for dam projects worldwide. 4,200,000 people have been permanently displaced. 23 local languages have become extinct when their last speaking communities were destroyed by floods. Each of these towns had its own personality, its own history, its own way of life that had evolved for generations. And each was evaluated by bureaucrats who reduced entire communities to numbers on cost-benefit spreadsheets. But what about the things that can't be measured on spreadsheets? How do you quantify the value of being the place where your great-grandmother met your great-grandfather? How do you put a price on the feeling of walking through streets where your family has lived for 5 generations? You can't, and that's precisely the reason why these places keep haunting the people who lost them. Submerged towns become obsessions. Former inhabitants return again and again to the reservoirs, hoping for droughts that will allow them to see the remains of their homes. They organize annual reunions by the water that covers their memories. They maintain traditions that no longer have a physical place to be celebrated. It's as if the towns, although physically destroyed, had moved to live in the minds of the people who loved them. And from there, they continue to exert a strange influence over the world of the living. The voices of Kapellsiemen, Old Pattensburg, and dozens of other sacrificed towns didn't fall silent when the water came. They just changed medium. Now they speak through dreams, memories, and the persistent feeling that something important was lost when we decided that progress was more valuable than continuity. And maybe that's the real tragedy of sunken cities. We didn't just lose the places. We lost the wisdom of generations who knew how to live in those places. Knowledge that had accumulated for centuries about how to be a community, how to belong to a specific site, how to build a life that had roots. Now that knowledge sleeps under the water along with the streets that saw it born. Chapter 7. The reflection of what should never have been lost. There is a pattern in all these stories that we cannot ignore. From Venezuela to China, from Italy to Thailand, the sunken cities are telling us something we prefer not to hear. Water doesn't destroy, it preserves. While the cities we left in the open air deteriorate, become contaminated, become uninhabitable, the cities underwater remain intact, as if they had found the secret formula to stop time. Think about it. Potosi has been underwater for 25 years, and its houses are better preserved than buildings constructed in the past decade. Xicheng has spent 64 years submerged and maintains an architectural perfection that modern cities don't achieve even when they're new. Water temperature makes the difference, between 8 and 12 degrees Celsius constant all year for decades. It's the perfect temperature for preservation, not cold enough to cause freezing damage, not warm enough to accelerate decomposition. It's as if we had accidentally discovered the most effective conservation technology in the world, and we're using it to preserve the places we destroyed. The irony is devastating. We have found a way to make cities last forever, but only after killing them. But what does this tell us about the future? Because the future is exactly what we should be talking about. Climate projections are clear and terrifying. By the year 2050, 630 million people live in zones that will be flooded by rising sea levels. We're not talking about small rural towns, we're talking about entire cities. Miami could become the next Xicheng. Venice could be the next floating temple. Bangladesh could lose 17% of its territory underwater. And here's what nobody wants to admit: when that happens, those cities will become the best preserved archives of our civilization. In 100 years, future archaeologists are going to dive in Miami streets, and they're going to find intact shopping centers with stores exactly as we left them. They're going to swim through skyscrapers, and they're going to see offices frozen in time with computers on desks and half-finished coffees. They're going to find our automobiles in perfect position in parking lots, our supermarkets with products on the shelves, our houses with tables set for dinners that were never served. But there's a crucial difference between the cities we have submerged ourselves and those that climate change is going to submerge. The cities we flooded by political decision were evacuated. People had time to pack, to say goodbye, to take the most important things. The cities that the ocean is going to flood are going to be abandoned in panic. That means they're going to remain as perfect snapshots of our civilization. Involuntary museums of life in the 21st century. Sunken cities are mirrors. They show us our reflection, but a reflection of the future. A future where water has reclaimed what is its own and has preserved for eternity the exact moment when our civilization realized it was too late. But there's something beautiful in that preservation, something that suggests that destruction is not the end of the story. The towns underwater are not dead, they are waiting, conserving their secrets, maintaining their structures, keeping their memories. As if they knew that someday someone is going to need to remember how we used to live. Maybe that's the real function of sunken cities. They're not tombs, they're libraries. Archives of humanity written in stone, wood, and metal, preserved by water for future generations, who are going to need to understand where they came from, And meanwhile, there they are, at the bottom of lakes and reservoirs all over the world, patiently waiting for someone to descend and read the stories they keep. The next time you see a lake, a reservoir, any body of water that seems too perfect to be natural, remember, maybe there's something down there. A city, a town, a community that someone decided was worth less than progress. And maybe, if you pay attention, you can hear the voices that refuse to be silenced, the voices of all the places that were flooded but that remain alive under the surface, waiting for someone to go down and listen to their stories. Because in the end, that's what sunken cities are, stories that refuse to die, preserved by water until someone has the courage to dive and face the past we thought we had left behind forever.